Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling confused, guilty, or somehow responsible for something you didn't even do? You replayed the moment in your head, wondering if you overreacted, if you misunderstood, or if you're just being too sensitive. What if I told you that sometimes this isn't an accident? Sometimes it's psychology. Every day, people use subtle tactics to influence decisions, control emotions, and shift power, often without you noticing. It can happen in relationships, friendships, families, even at work. And the most dangerous part? Manipulation rarely looks aggressive. It often looks like care, concern, or love. That's why intelligent, confident people fall into these traps too. In this video, you'll discover 7 psychological manipulation tactics people use, why they work on the human brain, and how to recognize them before they start affecting your choices. Because once you see the patterns, they become impossible to ignore forever. Manipulation is a psychological strategy where someone tries to influence your thoughts, emotions, or decisions in a way that benefits them, often without you realizing it. Unlike honest persuasion, manipulation usually involves hidden intentions. The person isn't openly asking for what they want. Instead, they create emotional pressure, confusion, or guilt so that you move in the direction they prefer. And the most important thing to understand is this: manipulation doesn't always look negative. In fact, it often looks friendly, caring, or even loving on the surface. Humans manipulate for many reasons. Sometimes it comes from a desire for control or power. Sometimes it's insecurity. People fear rejection, so they try to control situations to protect themselves. Other times, it's simply about gaining an advantage, whether that's attention, money, loyalty, or emotional dependence. In relationships, manipulation can appear as excessive affection followed by withdrawal. In friendships, it might look like guilt-tripping when you don't do what someone wants. In workplaces, it can show up as subtle pressure, blame-shifting, or making you feel responsible for problems you didn't create. What makes manipulation dangerous is that it targets normal human psychology. We all want approval. We all want to avoid conflict. We all want to feel valued and accepted. Manipulators use these natural desires as leverage. Instead of forcing you directly, they guide your emotions so that you choose what they want, while believing it was your own decision. That's why intelligent, confident people can still be manipulated. It's not about intelligence, it's about emotional triggers. Another reason manipulation goes unnoticed is that it usually happens gradually. Small behaviors build over time, tiny comments, subtle reactions, small moments of guilt or doubt. Individually, they don't seem serious. But together, they create a pattern of influence. By the time someone realizes what's happening, the emotional impact is already there. Understanding manipulation isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about awareness. When you recognize the patterns, you gain the ability to pause, question, and decide consciously instead of reacting emotionally. And that awareness is the first step toward protecting your independence, both mentally and emotionally. Now that we understand what manipulation is and why it works on normal human psychology, it's time to look at the specific tactics. These are not rare behaviors used only by villains or toxic personalities. Many of these patterns appear in everyday relationships, friendships, dating, family, workplaces, even social media interactions. The dangerous part is not that these tactics exist. The dangerous part is that they often feel normal when they happen. You don't immediately recognize them as manipulation. Instead, you feel confused, guilty, pressured, or emotionally responsible, without knowing why. Let's break down the 7 most common tactics. Gaslighting is one of the most psychologically destabilizing forms of manipulation. It happens when someone denies your experience, memories, or perception of events to make you doubt yourself. For example, you confront someone about something hurtful they said, and instead of acknowledging it, they respond with, "That never happened. You're overreacting. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive." Over time, repeated denial creates internal confusion. You start wondering whether you misunderstood. You begin to distrust your own memory and judgment. That's exactly the goal. Gaslighting shifts power. When you doubt your own perception, you rely more on the manipulator's version of reality. And once someone controls your perception, they can control your decisions. What makes gaslighting especially harmful is that it often happens gradually. Small moments, tiny denials, subtle contradictions. Individually, they seem insignificant. But together, they erode confidence. The key sign is this: you leave conversations feeling confused, apologetic, or mentally disoriented, even when you were originally sure about what happened. Guilt is a powerful human emotion. It exists to maintain social harmony and relationships. Manipulators exploit this instinct. Guilt tripping happens when someone makes you feel responsible for their emotions, problems, or disappointment, even when you did nothing wrong. Statements like, "If you really cared about me, you would. After everything I've done for you. I guess I just don't matter to you. You've changed." These phrases create emotional pressure. Instead of making a request directly, the manipulator attaches your decision to your identity as a good person. Now you're not just deciding whether to help, you're deciding whether you're selfish. That internal conflict pushes people to comply. Healthy relationships involve requests and boundaries. Manipulation involves emotional debt. The difference is subtle but important. A healthy request respects your freedom to say no. Guilt tripping punishes you emotionally for saying no. Love bombing feels amazing at first. That's why it works. It involves overwhelming someone with attention, compliments, affection, or promises very quickly. Constant messages. Extreme praise. Rapid emotional closeness. Statements about deep connection early on. The person makes you feel special, chosen, and deeply valued. But there's usually a hidden purpose: emotional dependency. When someone becomes used to that intensity, any withdrawal feels painful. And manipulators often do withdraw later, intentionally or not. Now the dynamic shifts. You start chasing the earlier affection. You try harder to please them. You ignore red flags to keep the connection. Love bombing isn't always malicious. Sometimes it comes from insecurity or excitement. But when affection is used to create control, it becomes manipulation. The warning sign is speed. Genuine connection grows over time. Artificial intensity appears suddenly. Humans are wired for connection. Social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The silent treatment uses this instinct. Instead of addressing conflict directly, someone withdraws communication, ignoring messages, avoiding interaction, or acting emotionally distant. The goal is not space for reflection. The goal is punishment. You feel anxious. You wonder what you did wrong. You try to fix things quickly to restore connection. That's the manipulation. It creates an imbalance of power. The person controlling communication controls the emotional environment. Healthy space is communicated. Manipulative silence is confusing. If someone repeatedly uses withdrawal to control behavior, that's not conflict resolution, that's emotional leverage. Victim mentality becomes manipulation when someone constantly shifts blame away from themselves and toward others. Whenever conflict appears, they position themselves as the injured party. "You're attacking me. I can't believe you'd say that to me. You always make me feel bad. I guess I'm just a terrible person." Notice the pattern. Instead of addressing the issue, the conversation turns toward their suffering. Now you're comforting them instead of discussing the problem. Responsibility disappears. This tactic works because empathetic people don't want to hurt others. Manipulators rely on that empathy. But empathy without boundaries creates vulnerability. Real victims acknowledge problems and seek solutions. Manipulative victims avoid accountability while gaining sympathy. Triangulation involves bringing a third person into a situation to create comparison, jealousy, or pressure. For example, other people agree with me. My friend thinks you're wrong. My ex never had this problem. Everyone else manages this fine. Now the conflict isn't just between two people. It becomes social validation versus isolation. Humans fear exclusion. When someone suggests others disagree with you, it creates insecurity and self-doubt. Triangulation shifts power by making you feel outnumbered or inferior. Healthy communication focuses on direct interaction. Manipulation introduces third-party comparisons to influence behavior. This tactic is subtle and extremely common. It starts with a small request. Something reasonable. Easy to agree with. Then another request follows. Slightly bigger. Then another. Each step builds psychological commitment. Humans like consistency. Once you say yes once, you're more likely to say yes again to stay consistent with your self-image. Eventually, you're doing things you wouldn't have agreed to initially. This isn't always malicious. Sales strategies use it. Social movements use it, relationships use it. But in manipulation, the intention is control rather than mutual benefit. The warning sign is escalation. Small agreements slowly turning into obligations. Why these tactics work on smart people. Many people believe manipulation only affects weak or naive individuals. That's not true. Manipulation works because it targets emotional instincts, not intelligence. Smart people often have strong empathy, responsibility, and optimism, traits manipulators exploit. Confidence doesn't protect you from emotional triggers. Awareness does. One isolated behavior doesn't automatically mean manipulation. Everyone uses imperfect communication sometimes. The pattern matters. Repeated confusion. Repeated guilt. Repeated emotional pressure. Repeated imbalance. If you consistently feel drained, responsible, or uncertain around someone, something is happening psychologically. Your emotional state is information. The goal of learning these tactics isn't paranoia. It's clarity. When you recognize manipulation, you create space between stimulus and reaction. Instead of automatically responding emotionally, you pause. You question. You observe. You choose. Boundaries become possible only when awareness exists. And that awareness changes power dynamics instantly. Because manipulation only works when it's invisible. Why manipulation works on the brain? Manipulation works because it interacts directly with how the human brain is designed to survive and connect. Our brains are not purely logical systems. They are emotional prediction machines, constantly scanning for safety, approval, and belonging. When a situation triggers fear of rejection, conflict, or loss, the emotional centers of the brain activate faster than rational thinking. One of the key players is the amygdala, the brain region responsible for detecting threats. Social threats, like criticism or withdrawal of affection, can activate the same alarm system as physical danger. That means your body reacts before your conscious mind has time to analyze what's happening. Increased heart rate, anxiety, urgency, and emotional discomfort push you toward quick resolution, even if that resolution benefits the other person more than you. Another factor is dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Manipulative dynamics often include cycles of approval and withdrawal, affection followed by distance, validation followed by criticism. This unpredictability creates a powerful reward loop. Your brain starts chasing the positive moments, similar to how people become attached to gambling rewards. The inconsistency strengthens emotional attachment rather than weakening it. Cognitive biases also play a role. Humans naturally want consistency, fairness, and social harmony. When someone creates guilt, comparison, or pressure, your brain tries to restore balance quickly. That urgency can override careful reasoning. Importantly, intelligence does not prevent these reactions. Emotional triggers operate beneath conscious awareness. Even highly analytical people experience the same neurological responses. Understanding this changes everything. Manipulation isn't about weakness, it's about biology. And when you recognize the biological mechanisms, you gain the ability to slow down your reactions, engage your rational mind, and respond intentionally instead of automatically. Protecting yourself from manipulation doesn't require becoming cold, suspicious, or emotionally distant. It requires awareness and boundaries. The first step is learning to trust your internal signals. Confusion, pressure, guilt, or emotional exhaustion are not random feelings, they are information. When something consistently feels off, pause instead of reacting immediately. The second step is slowing down decisions. Manipulation often depends on urgency. Someone wants an answer now, a reaction now, compliance now. But you always have the right to take time. Space weakens emotional pressure and allows your rational thinking to engage. Boundaries are the most powerful protection tool. A boundary is not punishment. It is simply a statement of what you are comfortable with and what you are not. Healthy people respect boundaries, even if they don't like them. Manipulative people often resist them, and that reaction itself gives you valuable information. Another key protection is observation without immediate judgment. Watch patterns over time. Notice whether someone respects your autonomy or repeatedly tries to control your decisions through emotion. Ultimately, protection comes from self-trust. The more you trust your perception and feelings, the harder it becomes for anyone to distort your reality. Awareness doesn't eliminate manipulation, but it removes its power over you. Manipulation loses its power the moment you can see it clearly. The goal isn't to fear people, it's to understand behavior. When you recognize emotional pressure, confusion, or control patterns, you gain something incredibly important: choice. You're no longer reacting automatically. You're deciding consciously. And that changes every relationship in your life. If this video helped you see things differently, make sure you subscribe for more psychology insights that protect your mind and strengthen your awareness. And if you've ever experienced one of these tactics, share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might help someone else recognize the pattern too. Awareness is power. Use it wisely.